Welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Lowell. This is our first of our September episode where we're going to look at games covered that we played in August. I'm joined here by my co-host, Sherry Stewart.
Hello, and welcome.
And also joined this episode by Jim Crocker, who is an old hand, who is one of the people behind Games on Demand at Origins. He is a veteran game retailer and has entered into a new phase of his life being a game convention retailer, which I had a chance to talk with him briefly about at Gen Con, which was very cool. Jim, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. You're helping me cross off one of my bucket list items here, so I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Listeners, in our first segment, we're going to talk about a game that we played on Gauntlet Hangouts in August. Sherry, we're going to start with you. Why don't you tell us the games that you played overall in August, and then what you want to talk about?
Okay, so once again, this is part of the sort of super busy summertime for my job. So I was a little bit lighter than I wanted to be, but I'm coming out of my slump for September. However, in August, it was 13th Age. Then I played a Session of Die. Looking forward to a lot more of that. That's from Kieran Gillian. Sort of fun. Alpha Centauri Year Zero is what we're calling it, but it's a Mutant Year Zero hack for playing Alpha Centauri. Fun. And then Action Cards, which is our homebrew Ocean City interface, and that was a lot of fun. But on the Gauntlet, I got to play Kuro again, one of my old faves, and I'll be talking about that.
Okay, give us the rundown. It's been a while since we've talked about it.
I know, but we have talked about it, but it is one of those games that whenever I revisit it, I think about it for days afterwards. Basically, Kuro is a J-horror setting, I guess is the easiest way to describe it. If you like J-horror movies, this might be for you. Has a weird, quirky trad system, but it's workable. Currently, it's offered by the French publisher Seventh Circle 7. It's available as a PDF on drive-thru, but as soon they have promised it will be available as print on demand should you need the copy, the Dead Tree version in your hands. It is a game that I love for its setting. Essentially, it's a weird future Japan, not at all like the real world, but it's been isolated physically and politically. And it's this country, but you're in Tokyo, so it's really the city that's trying to survive in the aftermath of a supernatural miracle that sort of blew the doors off of reality, and all of the world is suspicious and thinks they have super weapons, but it's really just some sort of weird bargain has come to pass and no one knows what's really happened. And it's weird and creepy and full of old spirits and awful new technology and a lot of greed. And usually the players are going to play investigators or problem solvers, something like that. So you're not the bad guys typically. At least it doesn't seem to put itself forward that way.
Is it actually a game that was originally written in Japanese and translated, or is it a Western thing?
Oh no, it's Western. It was written by French designers, I'm pretty sure. And so in some ways I think it's one of the things that makes it kind of wonderful and shiny because they have a real different take on it. So it's not the usual otaku, US otaku take on anime or on J-horror.
It's a different kind of appropriation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. Because my experience with this stuff doesn't come through movies, but it comes through comics, through manga, stuff like Spiral and Uzumaki and stuff like that. Is that something you could do with this?
Oh yeah. There's definitely those notes, or at least as I've played it. Here's the thing. I've never read the book. I've just experienced it. And so when we play, it's a lot of all that weird Junji Ito stuff, kind of that pervasive sense of irrationality and things breaking down and people just kind of trying to go on as if everything's normal, even when it's clearly not. That's kind of what's there, and that's what you're fighting. And it's sort of this creepy, hopeless future just outside your vision, and you're trying to push that away. And it really works because one of the things that they have is this crazy, horrible biotech that they use. Everything is bio, so it's kind of grotesque and organic. Yeah, and the like even the cell phone is unpleasant because it's like stuck into you, and it's not very good. And so you've got that weird kind of technology. You've got these old spirits that kind of go unnamed. If you think you know some Japanese mythos, you might be able to guess at some things, but you're going to be wrong because it's some horrible blend. Everything's just far more predictable, and the interactions are that we've experienced between the supernatural and the tech. So I can't tell what comes from the book or what comes from the GM. The GM is sort of an evil person, so it could be from anywhere.
Fair enough.
But but those are the things that we've investigated, and it's just it always keeps you disoriented. And that's exactly what I want out of a horror game.
So is it like a slow burn thing, or is it like high lethality, like you're swapping characters out because they're getting, like their faces are turning into starfish or something like that?
Oh, no. I think it's very much a sort of standard episodic. You, as the players, you expect to be there for at least a few episodes. And since that's what you're playing, 1 or 2 episodes, it works out. There's lethality there, and you definitely can get hurt. I suppose we could die, but we've usually played together and collaborated, so we haven't died. But it feels scary, if that makes any sense. Yeah, and it's like, it's just crazy fun, because it does feel very different and very sort of shakily in that place between Uzumaki and, like, of all things, Boogie Pop Phantom, maybe, just for the oddness and the kind of weird, like, maybe these things have meaning, maybe they don't, trying to fit the pattern together. And then a little bit of Witch Hunter Robin with sort of, it's this group of people and they're doing things and they have some odd abilities that ought to be notable, but no one seems to notice. So it's just in a weird triangle of experiences for me.
It almost sounds like there's a little bit of Persona kind of mixed in there, too.
No, we don't have any personal projection. So I would love that, and that would be an awesome layer to put onto it. But this is definitely, you're caught up in it. You never kind of get to wrest the control back. You're just kind of trying to figure out where it is and find the source and see if you can do something about it. But boy, I love that little triangle, though. It's been super fun. There are a few things I'm not too sure about since I haven't seen the text, and I kind of shudder too because I'm sure it's culturally insensitive all over the place. I just kind of go, I'm playing between these 3 media properties that I love. That's where I'm at. It may not be the most respectful place, but it is not disrespectful. It's a thing that I love. It's a game where if you really like kissing, it may not be the best game for you. And the system is wonky and unintuitive. There's a bunch of dice tricks to it. The skill list is like hundreds of skills. It will really slow you down. You're never really sure what you can do when you first see your character sheet. It takes you a while to kind of acclimate yourself. But in some ways, all of that kind of playing with the dice and looking through your character sheet kind of gives you something to concentrate on when the stuff is getting really weird. Like, you could take a little breather, go, okay, I'm looking for something that I could do other than that I can hit it, but nope, I'm going to hit it, or you come up with something clever and intuitive. It's that kind of the freedom and yet the wonkiness that comes with a classic trad game. And the other thing is that I'm not sure about it is I can't tell if it's a hard game to drop into or not, because of new players that we brought in, about half do really well, and the other half kind of, I think they have a sneaking suspicion that maybe they were supposed to know something that, like, the rest of the players seem to, like, they haven't picked up that we're all faking it, and they're a little bit uncomfortable with it, or maybe it's just not their bag. I can never tell. But that it's a kind of, I don't know how easily people fit into it, but some people do, and I will always run straight for it. So I had to say my takeaway on it is that this setting is my bag, at least when it comes to horror. It's like right where I want it to be. I want it to be a little disorienting. I want it to be weird. I want it to be something that I can act against, at least for the time being. And I want it to be a little scary, lethal seeming. Not that I want to die all over.
Fair enough.
But I like that kind of fear that you got to carry with yourself. For me, the setting, I love it. I hope everyone finds a setting that I love as much as this one. Messily adapt your own aesthetics, whatever you like. Find a thing and just lean into it no matter what the system is. Because when you find that setting, oh, it's so nice, so good. And this is mine.
Awesome. It's a really interesting game. I haven't used any of the modules or adventures or anything like that in it, but there's a lot of great setting stuff in there. And yes, the system is super disorienting.
It is.
So Jim, tell us about your August.
August for me was kind of interesting because there was Gen Con at the very beginning of the month, but then the conventions kind of thin out through the month of August when everybody goes on vacation, and then there's back to school and all this kind of stuff. And I've got like 7 or 8 between now and the end of the year, but August, I was free to play a whole lot of games. So, off Gauntlet, at Gen Con proper, I ran 2 sessions of Cartel in the Magpie Room, and I played a playtest session of Alexi Sargent. He's another Gauntleteer. I played his Autumn Triduum, which is a PBTA game of nuns fighting evil. That was a really interesting game. I also ran a session of Urban Shadows for some friends of mine just because we kind of got together on a Saturday and were like, let's play a role-playing game, and they drafted me into running Urban Shadows because everybody wanted to. So I stole the Coven Prime setting from Gauntlet Comics and just kind of dropped them into it locally, and we just sort of made it our own. And it was a great jumping off place because I kind of had an idea of who everyone was and where they were. So I didn't quite so much need to make things up on the fly like I would have just starting from scratch. So that was fun. So on Gauntlet, I ran 3 sessions of my ongoing Night Witches campaign, where we are working our way through the entire war. We're on the we are on the 3rd duty station at this point. So we've been playing about 4 months, like in a row, swapping people out. It's been pretty awesome. 4 sessions of The Ward, modern medical drama set in the Gauntlet Comics universe, which is what I'm going to be talking about in a little while here, and a 2-session feature of Hearts of Wulin, which I have found the 2 sessions to be like a real sweet spot to get something that feels like a feature film. And when I run it at cons, that's the only way I run it, and that's going to be running it at Gauntlet Con this year, and it just really works out well that way. So as a player, I was somehow lucky enough to grab a slot in your Gauntlet League Wrestling game, LOL, which was really fantastic. I had looked on at other people playing and going on and on about what a great campaign it was, and I finally got into it, and it has been super fun.
Good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And you were nice enough to let me switch playbooks when we found out that the playbook I was using wasn't working after the first couple of sessions, so I definitely appreciate that.
It's worth mentioning with that we're playing with Nathan Paletta's beta for the 2nd edition rules, which has been interesting because there are some significant changes in it.
There are, and especially, not to go on too much of a tangent, but some of the things where, like, the way that one would have GM'd 1st edition kind of has to change a little bit because of the way that heat and momentum have changed and stuff like that. But that's going a little bit off track. But in addition to playing in Gauntlet League Wrestling, I got a sneak peek of Sabine V's new trophy incursion that she's working on, which was pretty fantastic. It is about, rather than a forest, you are going inside the dead body of a colossal, several-story tall, comatose magic user, trying to find his heart, which is just super creepy and awesome in terms of, body horror type of stuff. I got 1 session of Monster Hearts using the Once Again We Return the musical setting, which was just super fun, and I got to choreograph a dance routine to my Pop Stars song that she sang. I played a 2-shot of Night's Black Operators with Alan and some of the GMT crew, which is his attempt to streamline the Night's Black Agents rules using Kyle Simmons' Operators game, and it's been interesting. We're kind of hacking away at it, all of us, as we play, which is a lot of fun. I was in 2 separate Lady Blackbird one-shots, because, like I told the people that I was playing with, if a stranger walked up to me at a bus station and said, hey, 4 of us are going to go play Lady Blackbird, I would just call whoever I was going to see and say, yeah, I'm going to be 3 hours late, and go play Lady Blackbird with them. So, and finally, because of the day that we are recording this, I've got a Girl Underground one-shot tomorrow afternoon that I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, so, lucky.
Yeah,
lucky.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be in that. So, a whole bunch of stuff.
So you said that you're going to talk about The Ward. I'm really excited about this. I have the ash can. I've glanced at it. And, of course, it's in the Gauntlet Comics universe. And so I want to know everything.
So I know Kevin Petker from like way back in the Metatopia days when he was very first developing the Ward. And so it's something where I've kind of been following the development of it. And when the Ash Can came out, I looked at it and I kind of flipped through it and I went, this is interesting, but how can I add superheroes to it? And it's actually really easy. Back when I first joined the Gauntlet, I did something because I saw Rich Rogers' Star Wars Saturdays that he did. So I came up with something that I called Super Tuesday, where I took mostly PBTA games and kind of added superheroes to them. I ran My Life with Master, where they were henchmen of a supervillain. I ran The Ward, where the hospital was in a city that had superheroes. I ran a Pasión de las Pasiones game, where it was a superhero soap opera, stuff like that. So when we came up with the Gauntlet Comics concept, right from the jump, I was thinking about, well, if this is going to be a real comic book universe, we want to have comics besides just superhero comics. We want to have our Vertigo comics and our detective comics and our monster comics and all that kind of stuff. And so this just lined up perfectly, so I put it on the calendar, and I got a bunch of great players that I was really happy to get. So The Ward is an RPG of modern medical drama. It is designed by Kevin Petker, and it's published by Magpie Games in that $10 Ashcan format that we've gotten used to, that Crossroads Carnival is in, and the first draft of Cartel, and
Passing, and Rapscallion.
Pasión de las Pasiones.
Velvet Glove.
Yeah, and all of those. So we've set the game in Gauntlet City. So the PCs are staff at a hospital that has to deal with basically all of the off-panel trauma that is associated with living in a world that has superheroes in it. They are all normals. None of them have any superpowers, at least permanent superpowers. More on that later, maybe. But they're trying to deal with just this insane world that they live in, but that, in a way, if you think about it, would be no more insane than trying to operate in a war zone or in the middle of a big terrorist attack or something like that. It's just giving the trauma kind of a different form. So what I dig about it is that one of my favorite modern comics is Astro City, and the story of hospital workers in what's basically a 4-color comic book world is exactly the kind of thing that you would see in Astro City. Like, that would be, like, I would buy that graphic novel.
Absolutely.
About healthcare professionals in the Astro City Hospital, right? So I've got these great players, and all of them have played with me before. A couple of them have actually played in other Gauntlet Comics games. One of them played in a Masks run that I did, and the other played in my Urban Shadows kind of salute to 90s and aughts Vertigo comics that I'm running. That is kind of an ongoing thing that I run a 4-shot of, like basically a limited series every few months or so. And they're all on board with playing a serious prestige drama that also accepts the fantastic elements and tries to make them meaningful. That can be tough, but they're doing great, and it is extra fun to see all the callbacks to previous characters or situations from earlier Gauntlet Comics games. So heroes that got mentioned in previous games are showing up. At least one character is the relative of someone else, the mundane relative of a hero from another game. The street narcotic that is a problem for them actually spins off of one of Rich Rogers' games that I played in. So
nice.
Yeah, we're just having a lot of fun with that, kind of taking the sandbox and actually using it to help us make content is a lot of fun. As far as the game itself goes, The Ward is really about doing difficult jobs and the way that your life gets distorted by a difficult job. So it models that buildup of stress and how your work infects the rest of your life really well. It does a really good job at that. Everyone has to take an addiction for their character, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like alcohol or cigarettes or something like that. The example that they give in the book is addicted to helping. So one of the characters is addicted to empathic people. So like if they feel like if they're connecting with someone, they can't say no to them, and just all the problems that creates in your life. They've come up with some really interesting ways, and some of them are subtle. Like there's one character who basically hate watches old rom-coms to mourn his dead wife. Like if a rom-com comes on that reminds him of his dead wife, like he can't turn it off. And so he'll show up like at the hospital exhausted because Say Anything was on cable like the night before and he can't turn it off. So, and some of the others are a little less subtle, but the kind of MC reactions that I can work in that rely on those hooks are plentiful and vicious, which is really fun. And finally, it's also got my favorite PBTA basic move of any game, which is feign competence. There's a separate role for acting professionally, but when you're talking out your ass in a professional capacity, you use this separate role, and it's just a great way to mechanize stuff like technobabble or soothing platitudes or the administrator that assures you that everything is going to be okay, and we've just had some great moments come out of that. So what I'm less sure about is it's an ash can with everything that implies, which is awesome because you only have to read like 24 pages of rules, but there's only 24 pages of rules, which means there are definitely situations, some of them pretty basic, that aren't covered in the rules or are only like they're on the reference sheet but not in the main book, and you got to kind of fish through to find out where they are because it's just on a single line, in the GM advice or something like that. We're managing, but every now and then we kind of have to pull up because we realize that something we're doing isn't covered and we go to look it up and it's tough to find it. But that's like standard with all those Ashcan games, and it's usually a problem that gets fixed when they blow it up. Mechanically, the stress and condition tracks in this game are awfully fiddly, and there's way too much handling in a way that means the conditions tend not to come up at all, kind of because there's so many of them. So, assuming that we keep using the game as it's written before a revision, my character keeper, I'm going to have to change it so that it's got one of those summary sheets at the beginning, like the Night Witches one does, because right now it's got everybody's character on a separate page.
Yeah.
There are so many conditions that can pile up. Each character has a stress track with 6 ticks, 3 levels of stress, and then there is a condition that can go with each tick on the track. So as the GM, if I've got 4 people in the game, I potentially have to keep track of like 20 conditions at a time, and there's just no way to do that. And if you actually enforce all of them, I think the way that the rules ask you to, I suspect like nobody's just going to be hitting rolls at all. And I get that there's supposed to be kind of a downward spiral there, but I feel like if I were really being prescriptive about actually going after people's conditions, it would just spin out of control probably pretty quickly.
It's interesting that came out at the same time as Passiones, because certainly the first Ashcan edition of that has a much more involved condition system with tracks and so on, and the version we played at Gen Con, and earlier on, this new version that he's put together still has the flavor of all of that, but he's done some really smart engineering to get those down to very, very manageable levels and also incentivize having them hit. It's really good.
It's so funny that you're saying that because like when I was thinking about the things I was less sure about, so I don't like to tell designers, you should do this, because I'm not a designer, but I was looking at it in my head going, oh man, I hope he sees what they did with Passion and how they simplified that. That was like the thing that was foremost in my mind, because that is exactly what it needs, is to kind of narrow that down and to have there be something that is still stepped, but that is general enough that people can put their own spin on it, but that is not this kind of smorgasbord. The other thing is that people get analysis paralysis, where it's like, oh my god, I've already got 4 conditions. How do I do a 5th one that's unique and it's level 2, but it's not overlapping with another condition somebody else has and all this kind of stuff, and it just gets to be a whole lot of handling at the table. Finally, and this kind of ties into the nature of that stress thing that I talked about, which is that the advancement reward system is kind of equally sort of a complicated, a little bit of a muddle. There's a little bit of the same thing going on as with the stress tracks. There's too much happening, and it's trying to serve more than one master. So you get perks when you miss a roll, which are like bennies, and you can spend those to bump other rolls or save them until the end of the game when there's a Dungeon World style tallying of your session, like, did you save a life? Did you conquer your addictions? Did someone use your nicknames? Stuff like this that kind of tally up then you can get extra perks for tallying that stuff up. Then you can spend them on one of several different kinds of advancements, some of which are mechanical, some of which are purely narrative, and any you don't spend get lost and you can't bank them for next time.
Oh my god, the end of session must drag.
It's called post-op in this game, which is maybe more like... I think we kind of need
too accurate.
Yeah.
Too on the nose.
Overly appropriate.
Sherry, do you have some questions for Jim? Anything you want to ask about the ward?
So the interaction that you brought in with the superheroes, how did that collide with all of this? Do you think it added any complication, or did it simplify it, or did it just add exclamation points?
I think it just adds exclamation points, because superheroes are... the interaction that they have with the folks in the hospital is essentially as a kind of... they're like celebrity law enforcement, with all of the problems that come from handling patients of both of those types combined into one person. One of the scenes that we had was a superhero got shot up, and they wheeled him in, and somebody came in with an NDA that everybody had to sign because they're going to take his mask off to operate on him, right? You know, stuff like that. And there's a street drug that they are dealing with that is a derivative of the alien blue juice that showed up in Rich Rogers' Masks game that I played in, that you take a hit of it and it gives you an unpredictable superpower for 1 minute. And so I wrote a custom move for that, and they dealt with a patient that something terrible happened to because of the unpredictable nature of it, but the patient talked the guy with the dead wife into maybe he could do something to bring her back. And so, like, it is, like I said, it's no crazier than some of the stuff that they come up with on General Hospital or House or anything like that. It's just kind of slots into this universe that we're all playing in together.
Awesome.
That's cool.
So your takeaway after all of that?
My takeaway is that I am just loving exploring the Gauntlet Comics universe in this whole series of different games that are superhero adjacent, but still respectful of the genre. Like, we're not taking the piss out of it, like it's not The Boys or anything like that. It's a different kind of story that is happening within that universe. Like I say, way more Astro City than something that's like meant to be a parody, right? Despite all of my griping about the stress track and the advancement system, the Ward does some really cool things in the PBTA space, really humanizes it, makes it entirely about the relationships of the characters. There's no combat to speak of in it. Like, there's kind of no move for when you throw a punch at somebody or when you pull a gun on someone. I kind of love that about it. And I'm really looking forward to the finished game and seeing some of the rough patches ironed out. But mostly, I'm just excited that Kevin has told me that my running these games is one of the things that sold him on putting a super's workup into the final version of the game. I'm super psyched about that.
That's great.
That's great.
That is great. So my month started out as Jim's did with Gen Con, and I had the chance to run for Magpie. I ran 1 session of Masks there, and then 5 sessions of Passiones, all of which were tremendous. Great players there. Just an absolutely dynamite crew, and every session was superb. Besides the Gen Con games, off Gauntlet, I ran 13th Age. I played Die. I ran that Alpha Centauri, a Year Zero game, and Action Cards, our OCI game. On Gauntlet, I played, which I don't have as much of a chance as I like to, that Night's Black Operators, a 2 session of that.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I think I did that just before your group did, and it was very interesting. And I'm looking forward to trying Operators at the Table at some point. And then I ran Kuro and Worldwide Wrestling, and then I also ran the game that I want to talk about, which is the Sprawl. Now, I've run the Sprawl before, not for the Gauntlet, but for another group in a long, like 12-session campaign. And this is a mission-based, Powered by the Apocalypse cyberpunk game that came out very early in the cycle, but before The Veil and other ones, and I'm pretty sure before Headspace. It's a game with a very strong play structure. You're runners, you get a job, you do a legwork phase, you do an action phase, which is the mission, and then you go and get paid. And It's very interesting because this came out and I ran it before I'd ever played Blades in the Dark or before Blades in the Dark had ever come out. And so coming back to it now with thinking about Blades and how Blades handles segments and operations and things has really kind of made me look at this again and think about how to tweak some of the tools of it. So I'm going to say right off the bat, I really love the Sprawl. I think it's a very fun game. It does some very cool things. One of the structures that it has that I really appreciate is at the start of the game, each player makes up a corporation, names the corporation, and you build a clock with 6 ticks like you do in other games. Then during the character creation process, you're going to connect characters to those corps, maybe not the one you made up, to explain where you're from, how you got your cyberware, all of that. And then when you build relationships, you're going to talk about missions that went south or missions that you were on. And those questions are actually going to tick up those corporations' clocks. As you play, you're usually interacting with these corporations. They're often employers. They're usually targets. Either way means you're going to cross them because if they're employers, you're going to betray them or screw them over or things are going to go wrong. If they're targets, you're going to be hitting them. And what happens is eventually you're going to put more ticks on that clock, and when a corporation clock reaches midnight, then they retaliate. So what I love is that the corporations run things and you're beholden to them, but in the end, they're the enemy. So we've got the cycle that you have to work with them, but they're also going to kill you. There's this whole cycle about capitalism eventually eating everyone.
Too real, man.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't until I came back this time and ran it that I was like, oh, okay, this is really dealing with the cyberpunk themes that I maybe didn't quite catch the last time I ran it. One of the other things I love about this game is it is super lethal. It will kill your characters. But it may not kill them. It may make you have to choose whether you get knocked out during mid-mission or whether you lose a limb. And that is a wild set of choices that you get when you take some damage. And this last session, we had a couple of people walking away with 1 minute to midnight on their harm clocks, and it was nasty. And that's different from a lot of PBTA games, especially because when you take harm, you actually roll a move to see kind of what the choices are that you take. So rather than, okay, I mark off these hit points, or rather than abstracting with conditions, we've got this roll that we go to. Masks has a similar thing. We take a powerful blow, but this is actually, I think, even a little more effective.
Like getting shot in Cartel.
Yeah. So the play structure is really cool. You roll to get the job and see if you can get stuff that you want to do. The GM puts these jobs out there. You don't necessarily have to take them. The legwork phase is about investigating, and there's a clock that if you spend too much time investigating, you're alerting the opposition. And the more ticks you have left on your clock, the easier it is for you to roll to get paid. And then they've got the action phase. I think that there are some ideas about the engagement role and things like that you could bring in from Blades to not change it up, but to add some other options, to add some other approaches to the game. And so I think there's a flexible structure there. What I'm less sure about is I think it has a little bit of the problem that Blades has, in that the GM has to make space for the players to not be on the missions, for the players to be living their daily lives, for the players to be exploring who they are and interacting with other and all of that. And there aren't roles for that. Like, there aren't moves necessarily for that segment of it. And so there's no really in-game, or not as much in-game support for that. And so the GM has to realize that. Now, if you want to run straight mission-based, it's there for you. But if you want to do more exploration of the world, you're going to need to do that on your own as the GM. There are a few other things. One, it has a rich net running system, and I still do not understand it. And I did what a lot of GMs I know who've run the Sprawl have done and say, don't make up a net runner. We'll fake it with tech characters. I don't think that's a great solution, especially if people like the net runner stuff. There's an element in the game, a set of rules called mission packages, which are ways of saying, okay, well, we've got to do this little job to do this thing, or set up these things that I always forget about. And it's a great tool. And when I was looking back to talk about it, I was like, oh my God, there's all this stuff that I could have been using to shorthand certain things, that I could have been using to emulate what the engagement roll does, and because it really works like that. Hamish has got a lot of guidance for that. So that's on me for not pulling that in. A couple other things. I do think it's a game that requires the GM to take some time to figure out the rhythm of it. As I said, figuring out how much time you want to spend on the leg work, how much time you want to spend characterization, all of that. I think it will take a while to get a sense of what that is. It's especially true if you have one of two playbooks in the group.
This is so funny because one of them is the one that I made a beeline for when I played with Hamish.
Yeah, there are two playbooks. One of them is the Pusher. And the Pusher is a character who manipulates people, is a media-savvy controller, and has followers at their command. And I had, when I ran this before, the Big Long Game, my craziest player took that, emulated the Umpties from Judge Dredd, which is a deep cut. Feel free to Google that.
Oh my God. Oh, I'm old enough to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But it meant the other characters who were more on a serious, like, net running, let's do our mission track, had some issues with him. And then in the current game we're playing, Puckett went with the Reporter.
Oh, yeah. My favorite playbook in that game by far.
Yeah.
Spider Jerusalem it right up. Yeah.
Yeah. It very much has that role, but it requires that the GM think through what the opportunities are going to be for that character, what the challenges are. And Puckett has done a great job of actually pulling some things out, going, oh, well, I think this is actually what's going on here. But I can see that in a long-term play, it would be more challenging. It's a game, it's a playbook with a lot of niche focus that you'd have to go, okay, well, this is a session or two that are really focused on the Reporter. Maybe this is a session that's focused on other things. And yeah, it changes the game.
It's definitely a playbook where you have a lot of stuff you can get away with once.
Yeah.
Like the corporate security guards are there and they're about to gun you down and you can go, hey, we're here live on a feed with these corporate guards about to gun us down. Your move, guys. What are you going to do? And then, they don't shoot you, but next time they know to cut your feed before they come at you with the gun. So you got to, there's a lot of stuff where you can only get away with it a single time. And then you got to mix it up.
The only other thing I would say that I'm a little bit less sure about, and this is actually critiquing a bounty. Hamish has released a missions book and a book called November Metric. November Metric has a lot of different locales, different cities written by a bunch of different people, and the missions book is really good, has a lot of different missions and stories, and those are really cool because he makes a point of saying this is a mission that works for these playbooks, works less for these playbooks. The thing about them is that both of these supplements assume that your characters are going to be traveling the globe. Like they're all in very distinct cities, very distinct settings. They have a lot of cultural things. The November Metric is a dozen different cities. That's all it is. And the missions book, most of those missions take place in very distinct places. Whereas whenever I've run Cyberpunk, I've always tried to stay in one place because I like the exploration of, say, Night City or whatever. It makes that a little more challenging to adapt, especially if some of the missions have particular cultural touchstones that they're playing off of. So that's just a warning for the GM looking at those books.
Or an enticement.
I want to say it's an enticement. It could be. I mean, if you're the kind of person who ran Euro Tour and Pacific Rim and Cyberpunk 2020, or you want your characters to be jetting all over the place and, we cut and the next week they're in Rio de Janeiro and the next week they're in Anchorage, I think that's fine. But know that going in.
Yeah, I guess it's also a way you could do an Altered Carbon thing where people get jacked in, they have an adventure in one city, and then their shells are ejected and hired by someone else in another city, I suppose, if you want to do that.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, I certainly think that that's a possibility, and that's sort of the high-tech cyberpunk that could work with that. So my overall takeaway, I'm going to say, is I still like it. I think it's a game with a learning curve, but I still really appreciate it. I think it's a forgotten gem sometimes of PBTA. More people ought to be playing it. I want to run it again next year. They've put out a couple of supplements that have fantastic elements to emulate Shadowrun. And I think definitely next year I want to find those and do those and run some stuff from those materials. So I'm looking forward to that.
The Shadowrun mention is fun because I've had people at my booth, and like you said, this is kind of one of that sort of very first wave of PBTA games that continues to sell consistently because it's good. But I've made the pitch explaining the game to people, and then they say to me, "Oh, so it's like Shadowrun, but without the elves and stuff." And it's like, yeah, I guess. I suppose.
Sherry, any questions or thoughts on Sprawl?
I would just like to point out that I was the one that bought the Sprawl for us, because Hamish pitched it to me as, yeah, it's all the good parts of Cyberpunk. And I was like, you mean the missions? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm buying it. It's very lethal.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that you talked to him at Origins that year and pushed me to do that. See, I credit myself, but not you. This is the problem.
I never forget.
Well, let's go ahead and go to our second segment before Sherry reveals more things from behind the curtain there, all right? Hello, listeners. This coming October, the Gauntlet will once again be putting on GauntletCon, our online gaming convention. GauntletCon will include guests, panels, a dedicated Discord server for mustering, and lots of RPG sessions. Many will be streamed and recorded. GauntletCon runs October 24th through 27th with events throughout those days to cover many time zones. If you're interested in our newsletter for GauntletCon, you can sign up at gauntlet-rpg.com/gauntlet-con-2019. GauntletCon's a great gaming experience, and I hope you'll consider joining us as a GM, a player, or a viewer. Listeners, in our second segment, we have our guest talk about a project or a thing they're working on or something they're excited about. So Jim, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to tell us about today?
Well, unlike a lot of the folks you have on as guests, I only really dabble a tiny bit in actual game design and in making games. I run a lot of games, but my experience in the industry comes from 20 plus years as a retailer, as selling people's games, introducing players to games, and just kind of generally connecting designers to customers and hopefully making a little bit of scratch in between there. So that means my day job is selling games at conventions all up and down the East Coast and in the Midwest. I have personal relationships with a lot of indie designers and just kind of sell their games for them at cons that they can't make it to. And my friends at Indie Press Revolution, I basically am their East Coast rep. So I do all of the East Coast cons, and then twice a year we get together in the middle of the country. They're in Nevada, I'm in New York. So they kind of get the left half, I get the right half of the country, and then we meet at Origins and Gen Con, and, I get to see them, we hang out, I throw 8-10 boxes of games in the van to bring back home and stuff like that, and it's been working out really, really well so far. But a cool thing for me is that I just recently added a new publisher whose games I'm going to be carrying alongside the IPR stuff, and I am very excited about that.
Interesting.
I can't say who it is yet.
Can't say who it is.
But I can say that I think the OSR appreciating contingent of the Gauntlet will be very pleased with the arrangement. It will mean that a major OSR publisher that maybe can't easily make it to the East Coast and the Northeast will now be represented at all of those shows. And there's gonna be like an announcement, and they'll publish it on their webpage and their blog and all that kind of stuff, and as soon as I can talk about it on Twitter, I'll be talking about it. But this is very exciting, and it's a good get for me.
Okay.
Is all I can say. I'm excited to have more great games to bring to shows. It'll double the size of my booth. It's like a serious publisher, so I am very excited about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, and the other thing is that we have GauntletCon coming up here on the Gauntlet, which is our all online tabletop gaming convention. This will be my second GauntletCon. I'm running a 2-session feature of Hearts of Wulin, because that's the best way to run Hearts of Wulin.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm also running a single session of my trophy incursion, The Flocculent Cathedral. But I have gotten together with Rich Ruane, who is organizing GauntletCon, and we're going to try something that may be a little crazy, maybe a little weird, but hopefully it will work out, which is that I'm going to be, as Jim likes games, the official gaming vendor for GauntletCon. So I will essentially be like a virtual vendor with a virtual table at our virtual convention. And the way that that is going to work is that I'll donate a percentage of every sale that I make from the minute the GauntletCon starts to the minute that it ends. Anybody that makes a purchase through my website, I will donate a chunk of that money back to the Gauntlet to help run the Gauntlet and support the con, just like at a regular tabletop convention. Just like if I was paying for a table at PAX or TotalCon or something like that. And to make it special, I'm going to order a supply of Gauntlet pins, of like cloisonne pins. And
nice.
We're going to include one of those free with every order that everybody makes to make it like a special thing, so that it's not just you're buying games that you otherwise would have bought for cheaper because you weren't paying shipping on them or something like that. But, we'll throw in a little sweetener that is a thing that should ideally be a thing you can only get at GauntletCon. We may have a few left over that we figure out what to do with afterwards, but that's going to be a special thing for GauntletCon. And Rich has said that I can have my own line in the Discord chat, so that if people want to ask me questions, just like if we were at a con, whether it's about something they want to buy or advice or whatever, I spend the lion's share of my time at conventions talking to people about gaming as much as I do selling stuff. And so, we'll include that. There'll be a little Jim Likes Games channel there on the Discord so that I can talk to people about that. And whatever orders I get, we give some money back to the Gauntlet. We throw one of those pins in there. It all gets, I spend all day Monday and Tuesday boxing it all up and shipping it out to everybody. Hopefully it'll work out for everyone. This is a total experiment. I have no idea how it's going to go, but I'm really excited to give it a shot.
That's really interesting. It never would have occurred to me to do that. Was it just something you've been thinking about, or how did that come about?
Well, it came about from me going GauntletCon. Gosh, wouldn't it be cool if I could somehow be a vendor at GauntletCon? There's no way we could make that work. And then I said, wait a minute, actually, because if you look at podcasts that have affiliate links and events that are a combination of actual events and virtual events, they work out sponsorship arrangements, and this is kind of just a version of that. And like I said, I have no idea. Maybe I'll make $25 and we'll shrug and say, well, that didn't work out too well. But I'm hoping that goodwill from folks who have met me online at the Gauntlet and who have bought stuff from me at conventions will translate into something that works out for everybody, and we can both make some money.
Awesome.
I was just thinking that I really want one of those pins to wear with my scarves. So is it the Gauntlet dice, or is it the skull for the 2019 GauntletCon?
I don't know. I think there's like a poll on the Slack, maybe.
I've got to find it.
Might be in our future. I'll have to set that up. It seems to me that the mailed fist holding the die is the iconic Gauntlet symbol.
It's true.
But we may want something that's special for
collectibles.
Yeah, exactly. And we could do a different one every year and stuff like that. So we'll have to see how all this rattles out.
It would just be like PAX.
And personally, for me, a purple-eyed skull would be perfect to go with about half my scarves.
Well, okay. So, Lowell, you're the master of the Slack. So with your permission, I'll put a poll up and see what people are interested in.
Absolutely. We'll definitely get that set up on there.
Fantastic.
And I think we'll go to our final segment. Listeners, it's Giving Me Life. Sherry, what is giving you life this week?
Okay, I guess I'm the great contrarian of life, but I have to say, lately it's been Twitter.
What?
Something specific about Twitter, I hope.
Yes, exactly. I have just started into Twitter, so maybe holding off until it had reached peak craziness was exactly the way to go. But I started out by, first I followed all the Gauntlet folks and then the people they followed. Then I followed my sister-in-law, Kat Rambo, author, and I followed her authors that she follows. Then I followed Taylor Swift on security and all the InfoSec folks that Taylor Swift follows. And then for some reason I was following Dr. Sarah Tabor, who is a sort of farm specialist and activist, and all of their science and land management folks. And it's the most strange and eclectic group of people. And the fascinating thing about it is that the intersections are like this super interesting group of young activists who are really articulate and smart, and from all these different groups of people, marginalized populations, indigenous populations, and just this sort of generation of smarter, more articulate young people. And it's been a blast reading this stuff. They've just got all of these ideas. They have a strong sense of justice and of solutions and of possibilities. And I can read through my Twitter feed and I have a jillion new things to think about. It's just fabulous. And they're also brilliant and engaged. And I'm like, I was such a dork when I was that age. This is amazing. But also it's exhausting. And so I'm going to bed earlier than I used to. So instead of 2 a.m., it's been 12:30, 1. Much better for my health. So really good stuff. It's worked out for me.
Yeah, like if you curate your feed right, you can get access to conversations that you never would have had access to even just like 10 years ago. That's the thing I find most fascinating about it is all of these conversations that I'm like, that I don't have anything to say, I don't have anything intelligent to say about, but that I can eavesdrop on, and it is just amazing to have access to that. That is one of the really amazing things about Twitter.
It is crazy. You can just sort of follow the trail into all kinds of different expertises, and all of a sudden there's people who are talking about it, and they want other people to understand, so they're working very hard at like making things graspable, and it's just it's like 1,000 tiny TED Talks, plus, a lot of funny cat pictures and crazy stories and jokes. And so it's just a pretty good time if you're careful. But yeah, you could end up with a lot of shrieking too. But been careful.
Have you split your identities yet into, I have one where I like do all my game stuff and another one that's like all my political current event stuff. And I try not to ever cross those streams because that's where madness lies.
See, I think one of the things is I'm not public enough.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That essentially I have to worry about that. I'm just a sort of mostly lurker with, lots of likes and the occasional heck yeah. And that's about it. But I love seeing all these people doing their thing. There's so many smart people, so many articulate people that I never would have heard from without Twitter.
Jim, what is giving you life?
What is giving me life is the musical Six, S-I-X, 6, like the number 6,
okay,
which is this sublime pop confection about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. So it puts forth the idea that the 6 wives of Henry VIII are going to basically each make their case to the audience for which of them had it the worst of any of the 6 of them. And they do this by singing original songs in the style of modern pop stars. So, respectively, the 6 wives do songs in the style of Beyonce, Lily Allen, Adele, Rihanna, Ariana Grande, and Alicia Keys, respectively, like in order. It was a huge cult hit in London, and just this summer, it made its way to the States, opening in Chicago, which is where I saw it. So now it's opening in Boston, where I'm seeing it next Sunday, and it's been confirmed for Broadway in 2020. So I will probably see it again on Broadway a few more times, probably several more times, because I live just like, a nice 35-minute train ride north of Grand Central Station. So going to see Broadway shows is super easy for us. I am not much of a music person, but I am walking around the house humming songs from this and listening to it on repeat on my earbuds, and my wife Shannon is equal parts amused and gratified that I have found a musical that I love more than she does, because she is a Broadway nerd the way that I am a gaming nerd, and that I am like more into a musical than she is an unprecedented event in the house, and I think it's kind of giving both of us life.
Okay, awesome. So what's giving me life this week is the greatest movie of the summer, and that is Hobbs and Shaw. I've never seen a Fast and Furious movie.
Best superhero movie of the year.
Hobbs and Shaw is amazing, and it is amazing for many, many reasons. But I'll tell you, folks, Idris Elba's motorcycle in Hobbs and Shaw steals the show. It is the best thing ever. And as I said on Slack, I would watch an entire movie about this motorcycle. I would watch a trilogy about this motorcycle. And that's all I'll say, because it is It is unbelievable. So, Hobbs and Shaw, there you go. And listeners, that is our show. If you're interested in contacting us, you can contact us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. We also have a Patreon. You can search for that, Patreon Gauntlet. And if you're interested in anything, you can find all of our podcasts and everything in details about how to join the Gauntlet and so on at gauntlet-rpg.com. If you like this show, consider rating it or, subscribing to the series, checking us out. That actually does help us get some attention. And that would be pretty cool. I wouldn't mind that. We've got some other great podcasts too, so you should check that out. Sherry, thanks for co-hosting again.
Oh, it was lovely. Thank you.
And Jim, thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much, Lowell. It was a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate your inviting me. Thank you.
Listeners, that's our show.